Dion Fortune, The Mystical Qabalah. Forward. Dion Fortune is both the magical name and the nom de plume of Violet Mary Firth, December 6, 1890 to January 8, 1946. The prominent British author and esotericist. The name she chose for herself derived from the birth family motto Dio non fortuna, which is generally understood to mean God, not fortune, with fortune referencing luck and not wealth, at least in this context. The prolific author of fiction and non-fiction, she wrote both esoteric and non-esoteric works. The Mystical Qabalah is widely considered to be among her masterpieces. Fortune is among the most significant teachers and pioneers of the Western occult renaissance of the 20th century, and her influence continues to be felt today, especially in Wiccan and neo-pagan circles. While Fortune very adamantly did not consider herself a witch, her impact on modern Western witchcraft practices has been so immense that it is almost impossible to contemplate any encyclopedia of witchcraft which does not include Fortune and her work. Decades after her death, Dion Fortune is still included and typically ranked highly in virtually every survey or study devoted to influential occultists, alongside such acclaimed masters as Gerard Gardner and Aleister Crowley. Likewise, compilations of best occult books mostly invariably contain at least one of Fortune's books, typically the Mystical Qabalah, Psyche Self-Defense, or the Sea Priestess, and sometimes all three. Widely studied, lauded, and written about, Fortune was respected in her own lifetime, as well as after. Published analysis devoted to her work exists, as do biographies of her life. The Society of the Inner Lights, the mystery school she founded in 1924, survives and thrives to this day. Fortune's presence remains tangible and powerful in Glastonbury, the town in southwest England that she loved and that is widely considered a sacred site by numerous spiritual seekers, Christians, pagans, and Arthurians alike. Her grave in Glastonbury has evolved into a pilgrimage for her many fans and students. Fortune has literally become the part of Glastonbury's sacred landscape, something that I think would please her immensely. Fortune thus is no unsung or forgotten hero of the occult as, for instance, Pulse Chow, Beverly, Randolph, Cecil Williamson, and maybe even Sybil Lee. Neither was she the subject of scandal like Crowley and to a lesser content Gardner, and so it is her work that is discussed rather than her personal life or proclivities. Something that I think would also please her. Her efforts on behalf of Great Britain during World War II, magical rituals known widely as the Battle of Britain or Operation Corn of Power, intended to stave off German invasion, are widely admired to this day. All of this presents a bit of a dilemma for someone seeking to write a foreword for a new edition of one of her classics. What fresh word can be said? Is there anything new to be written about Dion Fortune? Well, yes. I have written about Fortune in several of my books over the years, so that I had time to ponder her work and her. As I considered what to write about her in the foreword to this particular book, what struck me was how brilliantly independent-minded Fortune had been, something for which I think she is not given sufficient credit. Fortune experimented with various schools of mysticism. In her quest for wisdom, Fortune joined an array of organizations such as the Theosophistical Society and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but left them without hesitation when they did not mesh with her own personal beliefs or fulfill her needs or expectations. She did not force herself to fit a mold that she found uncomfortable. Perhaps her independence of mind and spiritual self-confidence prevent her from ever being a follower. She could only be true to herself by being a trailblazer. Fortune's determination to follow her own spirit, polar star, is rare. Her faith in her own convictions is breathtaking, especially when one considers that Fortune was a latecomer to these organizations. The Theosophistical Society was founded in 1875, while the Hellemetric Order of the Golden Dawn began in 1887, both before her birth. This is thus not only what Dion Fortune learned and taught, but also her insistence on craving her own path that had lasting impacts. Subliminally, she encourages us to do so as well in our own ways. Her refusal to simply go along with the teachings of others when her intuition advised otherwise, even when these teachings came from extremely prominent sources, is among Fortune's greatest and longest lasting gifts to us. On the other hand, as with author H.P. Lovecraft, problematic aspects of Fortune's works cannot be ignored or glossed over but must be addressed directly. Expressions of homophobia and racism, for example. It is easy to write that she was merely a product of her time, which of course she was, and that those beliefs, and the public expression of those beliefs, were very common then. But this is not sufficient, especially of someone who is held up as an exemplar. To put this into context, Dion Fortune's career overlaps in time with the Nuremberg Law in Europe and Jim Crow in the United States. Alan Turing, the brilliant British mathematician and World War II codebreaker, subject of the 2014 film The Imitation Game, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, was brutally persecuted for his homosexuality, then illegal in the UK. Following his arrest and conviction for gross indecency in 1952, Turing was punished with chemical castration. His death by cyanide 2 years later is widely believed to have been suicide. And so these hateful published opinions, and yes, they appear in so many books, not only in Fortune's, are not merely casual asides, but must be considered within the text of their era. They reinforce or introduce prevalent negative beliefs and are potentially quite destructive. To suggest that these ugly words can be ignored or excused, because so many others also shared them, insults those who did not do so, as well as those who actively fought against such widely held beliefs, often at great personal risk. At the very least, this language causes many readers to feel unwelcome. That said, many heated debates currently rage regarding whether Fortune's written words truly express her inner beliefs. In other words, was she really as homophobic as her writing suggests? Some claim that Fortune's beliefs were evolving and that, had she lived longer, this would be apparent. This foreword lacks the scope and space to further explore this. Yet another issue must be addressed: Fortune's lack of interest in esoteric traditions beyond those of Western and Northern Europe. This is ironic, especially in the context of mystical Qabalah. The root of Qabalah do not lie in Western or Northern Europe but in Jewish tradition. Fortune herself writes, it may be asked why it is the Western nation should go to the Hebrew culture for their mystical tradition. Fortune further then writes, the transliteration of Hebrew words into English is the subject of much diversity of opinion, every scholar appearing to have his own system. This is very confusing for anyone who wishes to use the geometric method of elucidation, in which letters are tuned into numbers. This confusion exists only in the context of transliteration. The Hebrew language lacks numeral. Instead, each letter of the Hebrew alphabet possesses a numeric value, as well as a sound, meaning that any letter or series of letters may be read as a word or as a number, or as both simultaneously. Geometric reference to gematria, a Jewish school of numerology in which the numeric values of letters and words are analyzed. If one is interpreting written Hebrew rather than transliterations, no confusion exists, at least not about the numeric values. Transliterations are intended as a way to use other alphabetic systems to express a word, to make it pronounceable for those unfamiliar with its original alphabet. This is not always straightforward. The English alphabet has more letters than Hebrew. In our particular context, 3 English transliterations exist: Qabalah, Qabalah, and Qabalah. The words are pronounced identically, but undercurrents of inference are attached to the distinct spellings, which are popularly understood as follows. Qabalah indicates the original Jewish system, both ancient and modern, theoretical philosophy as well as practical magic. And Qabalah indicates that Christian adaptation of this system. The C beginning the word may be understood to stand for Christ or Christianity. And Qabalah indicates a further adaptation of this system with its primary focus on the tree of life and the paths of the Sephirot. It may also incorporate aspects of Western esotericism, such as tarot. The Hebrew word Qabalah derives from a root word meaning to receive or accept. The origins of Qabalah, according to Jewish tradition, are subject to debate, although the different origin stories are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Some believe that Qabalah was taught to Moses, who received it directly by God, simultaneously with the giving of the law. Preserved as a secret oral tradition, it was written down by Shimon bar Yochai, the 2nd century CE Talmudic sage, healer, and exorcist, known as the father of Qabalah, and now a folk saint, whose shrine remains the most popular Jewish pilgrimage. Others believe that Elijah the prophet personally directed the Qabalah to Shimon. The Zohar, the Book of Splendor, generally considered the most significant Kabbalistic text, is traditionally attributed to Shimon, although others cite Spanish Rabbi Moses de Leon as his true author and the first to document what has previously been a closely guarded oral tradition. According to this thinking, de Leon attributed his work to Shimon bar Yochai as means of achieving credibility in the same manner that medieval grimoires are attributed to King Solomon and Pope Honorius. And once written down, Kabbalistic texts were widely circulated, discussed, and debated. Kabbalah's popularity spread like wildfire throughout Jewish communities of Europe, Africa, and Asia. Historian Yuval Harari writes, Qabalah is the name that has been used since the Middle Ages to describe Jewish esoteric knowledge. Enthusiasm for Qabalah attracted attention from Christian scholars and theologians. The earliest, such as Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, studied with Jewish scholars. Agrippa incorporated what he learned into his 3-book of occult philosophy, published in 1533, among the primary foundations of Western esotericism. But in general, Christian scholars sought to integrate Qabalah into a Christian context. Within a few generations, Christian Kabbalists were learning exclusively from other Christian Kabbalists, with Jewish scholars widely ignored, discounted, or even disparaged. In the terminology of the 21st century, this is appropriation. It is important to emphasize, however, that this appropriation began centuries before Dion Fortune's birth, and thus here is an inherited appropriation, not one that she originated. With the passage of time, many Europeans had forgotten the roots of Qabalah, or even considered that they had rescued the tradition by elevating it through Christianity. Alternatively, it was widely suggested that Jews no longer practiced Qabalah, although it remains a vital tradition in that community today. Even now, newly published books of Qabalah and Qabalah commonly suggest that Jews no longer practice the tradition or that they do not practice it correctly. The mystical Qabalah is comparatively gentle. She never denies its origin and occasionally references rabbis whom she has consulted. The mystical Qabalah is, however, very far from traditional Jewish Qabalah, as well as from the conservative theology of much Christian Qabalah. Instead, by integrating her broad scope of knowledge, Fortune has crafted a cohesive mystical system, essentially her own school of esotericism. It is interesting to observe how many Wiccan traditions have been named after men. Garnardian Wiccan, Alexandrian witchcraft, the Quranian and Gregorian systems, to name the mostly widely known. Despite her strong self-confidence, Dion Fortune was, in her way, a modern woman, and traditions she established do not bear her name. It would be a mistake, however, to discount her personal impact on these systems and to overlook her intellectual brilliance. Over the decades, many have considered the mystical Qabalah to be foundation of their spiritual practice. That is largely because of the influence of its author. Judica Ailes, author of the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells and Other Books of Magic, written at Equinox, 2021. Preface. The Tree of Life forms the ground plan of the Western esoteric tradition, and is the system upon which pupils are trained in the Society of the Inner Light. This volume and others are used as basis of the tutorial system of the Society. Particular to the Society can be found at www.innerlights.org.uk. The transliteration of Hebrew words into English is the subject of much diversity of opinion, every scholar appearing to have his own system. In these pages I have availed myself of the alphabetic table given by MacGregor Mathers in the Qabalah Unveiled, because this book is one gradually used by esoteric students. He himself does not adhere to his own table systematically, however, and even uses different spellings for the same words. This is very confusing for everyone who wishes to use geometric method of elucidation, in which letters are turned into numbers. When, therefore, Mathers gives alternative transliterations, I have followed the one which coincides with that given in his own table. The capitalization employed in these pages may also appear unusual, but it is the one tradition used among students of the Western esoteric tradition. In this system, common words, such as earth or path, are used in a technical sense to denote spiritual principle. When this is done, a capital is used to indicate the fact. When a capital is not used, it may be taken that the word is be understood in its ordinary sense. As I have frequently referred to the authority of MacGregor Mathers and Aleister Crowley in matters of mysticism, it may be as well to explain my position in relation to these two writers. I was at one time a member of the organization founded by the former, but I have never been associated with the latter. I have never known either of these gentlemen personally, MacGregor Mather having died before I joined his organization, and Aleister Crowley have been ceased to be associated with it.